Okay, good afternoon. Sorry. What's wrong? Just for a minute. It's not on yet. Oh,
I think it is on.
man, what's wrong? Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think we are live now. This afternoon, our guest is no other than the powerful Chris Force. Chris Force, the Managing Director of Responsible Solutions at the Silicon Valley in the USA. He is also the entrepreneur in residence for Founder Institute, the same Silicon Valley, USA. Like I said before, we have decided to make this session open to everyone that is interested because of the impact his messages, leave on founders of startups around the world. So, from wherever you join us, this is a privilege to be listening to a startup mentor that is recognized all over the world as powerful. I call him Powerful Chris Force because his messages are powerful. So, this afternoon is a privilege to have him on the show, on the studio, and then to speak to the 2023 UEC cohort. Those of them racing for the Goomba Millionaires Award that is coming up on the 12th of December. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to hand you over to powerful Chris Foss to do what he knows best. Thank you and welcome. Mr. Chris Foss, my people are here. They are the participants of the 2023 Goomba Enterprise Challenge. And by the grace of God, we want to prepare the next generation of young millionaires from Africa, starting from Nigeria. So I will appreciate you for the opportunity to be part of our program again. By the way, like you know, Chris Foss is an advisor, international advisor of the Goomba Center for Leadership Development in Africa. And we don't joke with him. He's a wonderful man. He has done a lot to support what we are doing in Africa. So, Chris Foss, thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always one of my favorite things to participate in this enterprise challenge. So I was asked today to come and talk about the power of vision. Now, most of you here today with us, are here because you want to change the world, and hopefully for the better. Believe it or not, there are people out there that don't necessarily want to change the world for the better. Now, while some of you may have brilliant inventions or ideas, or perhaps even a great plan, no matter how great the invention or plan may be, without a truly great vision, it'll be an uphill battle and you won't change the world. So we're going to talk about some ideas and overcoming obstacles, and then ultimately how you change the world with those things. Now, for those of you that don't know who this lady is on the screen, this is Helen Keller. Now, if you look at the quote that she has here, the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. Now, for those of you that may not know who she is, Helen Keller was both deaf and blind, and went on to be the first person to graduate college facing those challenges, one of the most inspirational leaders for those with disabilities in the world. And although this person could not see out of her eyes, she had vision far beyond the status quo. And I hope that to be the same for all of you today. So the biggest obstacle that I've realized when it comes down to actually changing the world and having the vision to get there isn't money, it isn't time, it isn't where you're located on the planet. I made a lot of impact when I lived in the middle of nowhere in the desert. The biggest obstacle that you are going to face on your path to changing the world is simply you. Now, what do I mean by that? How could I be the problem if I'm here today? I got up, I joined this session, I'm here to learn. How could I possibly be the problem? Well, you see, we often get in our own way. We also suffer from stinking thinking. We think about things from a limited perspective. We fail to realize the impact that we make in others' lives every single day. But what I can tell you for sure is the fastest way to get out of your own way, the fastest way towards getting on to establishing your vision, is to change the way you think. Now, Chris, why would I change the way that I think? People would ask. What do I change the way that I think about? Pretty much everything. Now, I know that's a bold statement, but it matters, and you'll see why today. You see, something that I hear all the time from great leaders all over the world is they say, Chris, I've got an idea, and it's going to change this world we live in. Now, I love that statement. I really do. And I hope that many people will change the world when they grow up and make big impacts. But on the strength of great visions, I've led and worked with some amazing teams throughout the world who have truly changed the world. But that's not always as easy as it may sound. And sometimes this is just a statement that people make and never get there. I want to help you get there. I'm going to tell you about some of these opportunities that I've been part of in the past and what we exactly did to change the world. Having ideas is not the same thing as having vision. So many people have great ideas. Vision is a particular type of idea. And we're going to talk about what that actually is today. And to make it very simple for people to understand, when people say, hey, Chris, what is vision? I say to them right away, I said, listen, your ideas, that's the spark, but the vision, that's the fire. The vision is what actually gets the job done. Without vision, you're not going to get much of anywhere. And we're going to talk a lot about the difference between ideas and visions later today in this presentation. But I can tell you this, one of the second biggest things that I hear on a regular basis is, I'm a visionary leader. People say that all the time without having any understanding of what it takes to be a visionary leader. But one thing I can tell you for certain is that to be a visionary leader, you have to know how to tell a good story, right? And telling a good story is going to help you get that message, that vision that you have across to people that you want to hear it. But before I spend all this time telling you about a bunch of successful stories and all of these interesting things, I'm going to tell you a story about failure. Now, oftentimes you don't hear people from around the world get on a meeting or go in front of a room of thousands of people and talk about their failures. But I think it's important that you understand that I'm no God. I'm not a special person. I'm a normal person just like all of you. But you see, I did something different with my failures than what most people do. We're going to talk about my origin story first. See, I'm from this town in the middle of Illinois, Rockford, Illinois. Now, it's a great little town about an hour away from Chicago. A lot of people know it from this band Cheap Trick, who is internationally famous, or they may know it from this movie A League of Their Own, which was a very popular movie when I was growing up about a women's baseball team in this town. But you see, what a lot of other people know Rockford about, and what I knew about very clearly, is that Rockford was the 14th most dangerous city in the country of the United States. Now, to get on the list, being a town of only 150,000 people, as one of the most dangerous cities, is a pretty interesting thing. I would have never thought about it. But why that mattered more to me when I was growing up is I just grew up as a normal kid. Both my parents were in law enforcement. So when you live in the 14th most dangerous city in the country, and both of your parents, both my father and my mother, have spent 35 years in law enforcement, as growing up as a young kid, you kind of have this interesting perspective. You hear them come home every day and talk about some of the challenges that are happening in the community. Some of the people out there that have the wrong vision about their careers and are doing things for the wrong reasons. So when you grow up as a kid with parents who are both in law enforcement, I'm sure most people would say, hey, listen, this kid's going to grow up to be a police officer as well. Well, I can assure you that when both of your parents are police officers, the only thing you want to be is an astronaut, because that's exactly what I wanted to be. I did not want to go down the same path. You see, I had a different vision. I had a different plan of where I was going. And to me, being an astronaut is all I ever wanted from the time I was a child. And so much so that I got involved in NASA, our space program in the United States, when I was 10 years old. I was part of a project that made history, and I did it when I had no real experience whatsoever in the space program until I started on that project. I was involved in Young Astronauts. I went to Space Academy, which was amazing, which is a school for young kids to learn about the best way to get on path to become an astronaut. So I felt I was doing it all the right things. But you see, when I got to Space Academy, some people know it as Space Camp, I was a bit chunky, overweight. I've always been as a kid. I still am as an adult. And come to find out, you have to be in a certain physical fitness shape in order to be an astronaut. Now, I never thought about this as I'm eating my cookies and string cheese, that I'm going to perhaps have to fit into that space suit that I showed you in the slide prior. And they said, Chris, listen, unless you lose weight, there's no way you're ever going to be able to be an astronaut. Now, I didn't believe them, but because I kind of grew up in an environment where you challenge the status quo, I said, who sets this rule? I'm going to change it. Young Chris thought that he was going to change this policy for the space program. And they said, listen, that's no problem. There's somebody that actually sets these rules in America. And all you have to do is get in touch with the President of the United States and say, hey, listen, President, make it so fat kids can become astronauts too. Now, when they said that to me, I'm sure they were joking. But I took it serious, you see. So I went to my uncle in Illinois, and he was a big lobbyist. He fought for rights for people with law enforcement, did a lot of interesting work in Washington, D.C. to help our country. And I said, Uncle, listen, I want to meet the President of the United States. He's going to help me change the rules and allow me to be an astronaut, both younger and overweight. And he said, Chris, although that's a lofty goal, and eventually you may get there, it sounds like you're also interested in politics and how that system works. So he introduced me to this person who was running for the United States Senate, one of the highest offices in the land. And I went on to become this person's youth director, and we won that United States Senate race by doing things different, by defying the status quo. Now I'm on my path to being the president. I already met a U.S. senator. And then I said, Senator, listen, what can I do to get involved even more? So as opposed to introduce me to the president, which would be a step up from him, which I thought he would, he introduced me to a congressperson, which is technically a step down. But this congressman changed my life. His name was Congressman Don Manzullo, and he was the chairman of the Small Business Committee in the United States House of Representatives. Now, this is the first time I got to see how much the government plays a role in small business, how much the government charts the path for startups in the United States. And most importantly, how the government impacts the vision of everyday people like you and I. And the United States government does a lot of interesting things in this regards. So I got involved in his campaigns, and ultimately I made my way all the way up to this lady. Her name is Elizabeth Dole. Now, Elizabeth Dole, she was president of the American Red Cross, which is a very prominent organization in the world. But what I loved about her even more was she was a cabinet member, one of the first female cabinet members, and definitely one of the only that have served in two roles. She was the Secretary of Transportation in the United States and also Secretary of Labor under two presidents. Now, when you grow up in American politics and you meet somebody that's worked for two presidents at the highest level, you're immediately taken back. And she decided that she was going to run for President of the United States. Now, her husband, who's in this photo, he had ran before for President of the United States, very prominent U.S. Senator named Bob Dole. Bob Dole is a very interesting person, a U.S. veteran of foreign wars, and everyone in America knew him. More people knew him than knew his wife. But you see, Elizabeth Dole had all of the experience. She had the vision. She had charted her own path. So we decided that we were going all the way and running for president. Now, it was a very interesting race in the year 2000. I know many of you weren't even around yet at this point, but there was a lot of candidates running for U.S. president. And although we made a very strong effort, we came in third in the primaries at the Iowa straw poll, which wasn't enough for us to continue on our race. So Miss Dole decided that she was going to step aside so we can make sure that the people that actually mattered even more in the polls had the opportunity to get there. Now, there were some very interesting people that I met on this campaign, and one of them was this guy here, Ari, and he said, listen, although we love Elizabeth Dole, she's decided not to run anymore, but there's this dude down in Texas in the United States, and we think he has a chance to go somewhere, this dude down in Texas. And that dude in Texas was this guy right here, George W. Bush. Now, you may not have been born at the time, but you certainly have heard of George W. Bush. And it was a very interesting time, whereas Elizabeth Dole had done all the right things to get on the path to run for president. President Bush, on the other hand, had a more interesting and colorful background. You know, there's several movies and documentaries about this particular person. I implore you to watch them. But you see, what he did do is he did have an amazing way of articulating his vision. So not only did he have an idea of how the world could be better than it is today, but he also knew how to actually tell people about it in a large enough manner that it actually resonated with the people. And we went on to win that race. A lot of people thought it was going to be impossible because President Bush, although he was governor of Texas, he lost a few federal elections through the years. And that campaign, again, was another thing that changed my life. Now, this was before I was even old enough to vote. I was working on the campaign for a president, now this being my second presidential campaign. And it was amazing. We did some pretty cool things in politics, and politics became everything that was my life. Here's me back in the day with interesting blonde highlights and basically a mix of every important person in Republican Party politics at the time. Leaders, governors, television reporters. I spent time with all of them. It was amazing. I was featured in every news article. They thought I was this visionary leader in politics. I was going to go on to become president myself. But you see, what people don't understand is when you're young, and a lot of things like this start coming into your life, it creates a tremendous amount of pressure. And sometimes having too much pressure gets in the way of your vision. You end up doing things for different reasons than what you thought before. I was very good at fixing problems for candidates, but what I didn't realize is that sometimes there are problems I wasn't going to be able to fix myself. You see, I grew up in a Sicilian family. My mother, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, they're the ones who raised me. My parents divorced when I was very young, and although my parents worked together for 35 years, I came from a single-parent household. And when you grow up in an Italian household, one of the things I can tell you for certain is if somebody in your family, especially if your mother gets sick, you're coming home to do everything you can to help her. And as you can see, my mom's hair was short here because she was undergoing treatment for cancer. She spent all of her years working so hard to help people in law enforcement that ultimately she didn't take care of herself as much as I'm sure she wanted to. Now, my mom wasn't just an everyday police officer. She did a lot of things to change the world. And back then, there was a lot of discrimination for women that were in law enforcement. Matter of fact, they wouldn't even let women in law enforcement patrol the streets. And so my mom decided, she said, listen, something's wrong about this. And she decided that she was going to take action and change the way things were going to be for women in law enforcement. My mom was considered a pioneer in law enforcement, and ultimately she passed away. Now, what a lot of people didn't know at the time is that I had had my wisdom teeth pulled a couple years prior. And when you have your wisdom teeth pulled, it doesn't necessarily hurt that much, but they certainly give you a lot of medicine to prevent this pain. And I was doing this medicine not as prescribed. In fact, I did several months worth of Vicodin painkiller in the matter of a couple weeks. Now, when you do that, trying to wallow in your own self-pity, you surely lose your vision. You surely lose your goals in life. But in my case, I did not die. Instead, I came out of this addicted to opiates. And the only thing that stopped this addiction was my mother passing away. And you can see this article that was written in the newspaper about my mom being a pioneer in law enforcement. That's an amazing thing. But if you look closely at this front page article in the newspaper, you're going to see here that her son was arrested for theft at the funeral home. Now, I'm that son, her only son. And my drug addiction put me down a path where not only I didn't have a vision, I didn't know where I was at today, let alone know where I was going tomorrow. And I ultimately stole a coin purse that had money in it to support my drug addiction. And it was wrong. And you do things like this when you're an addict. And you see, what people don't understand is, yes, there's a lot of horrible sides to being an addict, being around addicts, and being around people that abuse themselves like this. But nobody knows how dark and grim it is to be the addict themselves. Now, one of the first campaigns I ever worked on in my life was a judge's race, and he was close with my mother. And ultimately, he felt the best thing for me was to spend the next 4 months of my life living in this house with a bunch of new roommates. You see, I was arrested the day after my mom's funeral for that crime, and they put me into the county jail. Now, the same jail was filled with people that have been arrested by my parents one time or another through their lives. So for the next 119 days, I was going to be living with people that definitely weren't a fan of my family. But what I learned being in a room of people that I never expected to be in, even after working all the way up in presidential politics, is that people's perspectives on life, their paths, their own vision, well, it doesn't matter where you're at today. You can have all of those things. Even people in jail have some amazing ideas. And what I found is that some of these people in the jail with me would be the best business leaders on the planet if they weren't selling drugs on the street corner. So how do you take that skill set that they had, selling drugs or committing crime? It takes a smart person to keep an addiction up. It takes a smart person to break into buildings and steal things and get around security systems. So if we could just simply teach some of the skills that I learned in politics to these people that were in jail with me, or perhaps some business skills, they may end up being the best business leaders of all time. Not just employees on the street corner, but employers of legal businesses to help people change their lives. So I decided right then and there that if I was ever going to be let out of jail, when I did, I was going to do everything I can to help this group of people get to the next level. So ultimately, what I realized is that up to that point in my life, I had pretty much spent all my time celebrating success, right? So whether it be my own success or getting a candidate elected to office. But what I realized in the end, that success didn't really matter. I ended up in jail. I ended up a drug addict. My mother was dead. So all that success wasn't what was going to be my legacy for certain. I tarnished that. But what I realized is that without any uncertainty, that our legacy isn't necessarily just built on our successes. It's not just built on our ideas. It's built on how we react to our failures. And I had a considerable amount of failure leading up to this point as well. So I was going to do something about that. Now, oftentimes when you face obstacles in your life, it makes it hard for you to realize where you're going next. And I have created a considerable amount of obstacles up to this point. You see, I left to work on the presidential campaign and I never finished my college degree. In the United States, you generally have about 120 credit hours to graduate. And I believe I had 118. And all I had to do was take an online class. But what got in my way was my drug addiction. And I didn't finish that. And I was scared that people were never going to take me serious without a college degree. Even though not everyone has a college degree at that point, college degrees mattered even more than perhaps they do now. I also thought that people would think that I wasn't going to be qualified enough to get anywhere without a college degree. And the worst thing of all is, in America, sometimes if you can't afford college all the way, you take out loans. And when I was in jail, I wasn't paying back these loans, and they defaulted, which means that I wasn't even able to go enroll in school to finish my degree. So these are some obstacles that I faced, and I handled them in a very weird way. You see, whenever I had the opportunity to teach people, I always did. And I was fairly good at it. So much that I had an opportunity, although I didn't have a degree, to become a college professor. So I served as an adjunct professor and inspired lives at a university because I didn't focus about what I didn't have. I focused on helping people get where they wanted to go. And then after a while, the university I didn't finish my degree in, the university I'm wearing the hat today and the logo on the screen, said, listen, Chris, you are an alumni. Just because you didn't graduate school, you need to stop thinking that you're not an alumni. So I went on to create the largest alumni movement ever in a school, even though I didn't have a degree. The degree is a piece of paper. The time I spent at the institution, what I learned and what it did for me, that is something that lasts for a lifetime. So I started giving back to that school as much as I could. Went on to grow the largest Facebook group, the largest reunion movement, 20,000 people are in the group that I built supporting this particular school, and even without having a degree. The piece of paper doesn't define you. It's what you do with your day. It's your vision that matters most. And then so much so that after teaching in an undergraduate and graduate program, and after going back and making amends, if you will, to the university I didn't finish, I went on to become one of the most widespread leaders in the accelerator space and startups in the world. I'm a top-rated mentor and an advisor on 5 continents for startups, but it's not because of where I was. It's because I'm starting to understand my vision of where I'm going. Now, that wasn't the only obstacle I faced, not having a college degree. I'm also now a felon and a former drug addict, and with that comes a lot of stigma. Let me tell you, people don't necessarily like to know that the person they're around was once a bad drug addict that stole things, even though his parents were both police officers. But also there's various legal limitations that come once you're arrested in America, as I'm sure it is around the world. And so not only do people question you, they're going to make it hard for you to do something to fix it. And also when it comes down to it, when you have a felony or you've been arrested or you have to check the box that says, yes, I was a drug addict, you know, it creates a lot of unease when it comes to getting a job. And I was going to face a challenge getting it. Matter of fact, somewhat hilariously, I applied for Walmart one time, and I wasn't able to get an interview. Even all these years, all these successes, working for presidents, meeting people, traveling the world, changing people's lives, I couldn't even get a job bagging groceries at the local store. So I knew I had to start my own business. And when I sat in jail and thought about all the things I wanted to do, I thought that I wanted to, just like in politics, I wanted to help people in jail tell the better story. I wanted them to be able to frame in their lives where their addictions and their challenges were, and make sure that it didn't define them. So I started a company to do just that. And then after spending time on probation, which is what you have to do after you get out of incarceration here in the United States, the probation department became my client. So the very people that were challenging me to become a better person 10 years prior, the very people, the last and least likely people you'd ever expect to take somebody who was a client of theirs and come to me and say, hey, Chris, we'd like to be a client of yours. So less than 10 years later from being jailed and controlled by this organization, I was able to help them make a difference in other people's lives, so much so that it got me the opportunity to do a fellowship with the Institute of Real Growth. I'll touch more on that in a little bit. Next thing is politics. There was everything that I knew in life. I didn't know anything else to this point. I didn't have normal jobs. So what am I going to do? All my skills are in one bucket that, in essence, I'm prohibited to do. And at this point, I felt that I was never getting elected. You see, when you spend a lot of time working in politics, you start to realize, well, maybe I want to run for office too. Maybe as opposed to chasing down the president to tell them my vision of being an astronaut, I can become president myself. But ultimately, drug addiction is not the number one thing people want to hear when you run for office. So I thought my election possibilities were over at that point. And at that point, I only worked in one-party politics. I worked in the Republican Party. So I didn't necessarily have the opportunity to have experience on both sides of the aisle, so I didn't know what I was going to do. Matter of fact, I was famously prohibited from participating in Republican Party politics. My probation officer felt that that would be a trigger that would send me back on the path to becoming an addict again. But what he didn't say was that I couldn't be involved in Democrat politics. You see, when you go to jail as a Republican, chances are you're coming out as a Democrat. So I dedicated my time working on the other side of the aisle. Here in this photo, some of the biggest, the governor of California, the ambassador of Japan, some of the greatest Democrat leaders of all time. And in about 6 months, I moved myself all the way up in the Democrat Party to what took me more than 6 years to move up in the Republican Party. So much so that I helped this lady become the first female mayor elected in a municipal history. In over 100 years, a town had never elected a female to be their administrative leader. She came to me and said, Chris, we're going to change this. And we did. And then after that, it set me on the path to get in public office myself. I spent 3 terms in public office chairing a commission that changed laws, changed lives for every resident in this community. Even though people say I couldn't do it, I did, because you see, I was starting to understand the difference between having an idea and having vision. And ultimately, what I realized is that changing the world definitely requires vision. And to that point, I had a lot of success. And you can have success without having a very clear vision, but I'm here to tell you that it won't matter. What do I mean by that? If I can have success without vision, then why would I need vision? Well, there's a lot of reasons why. You see, as I was progressing in my company, I had it all. I had the office building. That small idea I started in the jail cell to help other people became a huge public relations firm with clients all over the world. But I was spending less and less time working with people that I set out to work with in the beginning. I was spending less time finding people that faced challenges like me. It became all about the dollar. I started doing things for the wrong reasons. And ultimately, when you do that, you kind of sit back and reflect. And my best friend died of drug addiction. I tried to do everything I could to stop it from happening. And I realized at that point that I didn't have a strong enough vision. I didn't have a clear vision. So as you can see in this photo here, that beautiful logo I had up on the wall started getting ripped down. I ripped everything down, and I decided that I was going to move to an area that ultimately I used to get drugs in. And I was going to recraft my vision. I was going to focus, and I was going to do things to change people's lives. So we packed everything up in this office. I literally went on television and fired all of my clients. We found a place on, so I grew up in the 14th most dangerous city in America. Well, the 13th most dangerous is this area I was going to move to. And it wasn't necessarily the most beautiful part of town, but I knew that when I couldn't get drugs in my hometown, I would travel over to this area. And this is where I would get drugs, my friend and I, the friend who died. And ultimately, we took this office and we turned it in to something that was different. We decided that although it wasn't the prettiest thing, we were going to renovate it and we were going to do big things. We were going to help people understand their own vision and help make that a reality. So much so I started a policy institute. We started focusing on projects and ideas that would actually impact lives of people across the city. Move Chicago Forward, one of our initiatives, impacted so many people's lives. We created programs for people to stop bullying. We created agricultural programs. We did such amazing things under our new vision, so much so that I was honored as a World Peace Ambassador by the Nobel family. And it's, the same people that historically started the Nobel Prize. And it wasn't so much about the idea that I was some special person. It was the idea that I felt everyone had something special in them, and I had dedicated my life to help them get there. There is a bunch of information about this on the BBC, and all you have to do is Google Chris Foltz heroin addict, and this will come up. A positive article. You see, at that point, I thought even telling anyone about my addiction was going to hurt me. And now telling people about my addiction and challenges only helps them, which ultimately helps me and helps our world. And what I realized is that I had a lot of ideas. I thought I had vision, but there's a big difference between them. And I'm going to explain to you the difference between having ideas and having vision and why vision matters so much. You see, ideas comes from a very specific area. The nature of it is you can have a lot of ideas. They're constantly coming up. That's great. I'm sure a lot of you have great ideas. These things can happen to last just for a short period of time. They can be all over in your different life, but it doesn't even have to be something that's long term. You don't always actually take action on them either, right? There's plenty of ideas that I have in my brain, like many of you, that I've never done anything with. And ultimately, when you're thinking about it, an idea is something that can impact a couple people. It can impact an infinite amount of people, but it's just an idea at this point. And an idea alone is not going to create any impact. It's not going to change the world. It requires something in order to get there. And an easy example to make this easy for everyone to understand is an idea would be something like the idea of an electric car, right? Just having that idea of an electric car is an amazing thing. But it's not going to matter unless you do something with that idea. Now, a vision is different. And I'm going to compare and contrast a vision to ideas. You see, when you're thinking about vision in general, you're looking at a goal of the future. A vision is about seeing the world in a particular way that's better than it is today for people. Just because you may have something that you think only impacts your life or only impacts your area of the world doesn't mean it can't impact everyone. So vision you are required to think about things from a better perspective than what they are today. What I can tell you is this, is that vision is a long-term thing. It's constant, it's persistent. It is something that you work at regularly. It doesn't change often at all, if not never. Ultimately, it requires you to be dedicated like you've never been before in order to get there. You're never going to bring it across the finish line unless you are dedicated and persistent on a daily, hourly, momentarily basis, every single moment of your life. The vision is what's in front of you. And ultimately, visions tend to be broader in scale. You know, an idea, you may have an idea that just benefits you or something cool that you put up in your house. But you see, vision is broad. It's further reaching. It's something that impacts a larger group of people. And one thing I can tell you for certain is that vision isn't just for you to have clarity. It's what inspires your team members. It's what gets the people around you to join on your vision to get where you're going is inspirational in its own right. And when you're looking at the example of an electric car, in this, a vision would be seeing a world where transportation isn't limited by the challenges of the environment, seeing a world that's more sustainable. That is a vision when you're thinking about electric cars. By creating that car, by taking that idea and looking at it as a broader sense, as a world where people are driving them and making an impact, that's a vision. That's a world that's a better place. Now that we know a little bit about ideas and vision and what makes them different, we have to look at the idea of, well, what does it actually take to change the world? What's the difference? Chris, I've now got vision. How do I change the world with it? Well, I decided to compare and contrast that as well. You see, changing the world requires taking action on those visions, and a lot of people don't do that. You need to take action on the vision. It doesn't just happen once you declare it's a vision. You have to do something with it. And you have to impact people. And it's not just impacting people now, it's impacting people tomorrow. Changing the world. We all wake up every morning, and in essence, that is changing the world. It's a world with us then in a world versus a world without us. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what you do today is going to impact generations to come. That's what the requirement is to change the world, impacting people beyond yourself for a long time. And one thing I can tell you for certain, without having a bunch of people on board, meaning that you need to have an idea, you need to be able to articulate it into a vision, and you need to be able to share it with people in a way to get them to buy it on. Without having those people that are committed to it, you're never going to change the world. It's a requirement to have a team. It's a requirement to work with other people. It's a requirement to collaborate in order to change the world. Oftentimes you'll see that vision, can be broad, ideas can be narrow, but without a doubt, changing the world impacts a larger swath of people than that. Oftentimes the entire world, for that matter. That's why we're changing it. But every little bit that we do to make an impact changes it for someone. But changing the world and making that phrase a regular part of your vocabulary means something broader. And ultimately, this is something that transforms societies, transforms not just individuals, families, communities, cities, municipalities, Abuja, Africa larger, Nigeria, all of it can be impacted when you have the right vision and you articulate it. In an example that we give here, as it pertains to the electric car, this is the idea that the broad adoption of the vision of a world with electric cars that becomes more sustainable, that's what changes the world. You see, you can have a great vision, but without broad, widespread adoption, it's not going to matter at all. So we know a little bit about ideas. We know what vision is, and we know the requirements of changing the world. Chris, do I have it all figured out? Well, no, I didn't have it all figured out either. You see, I needed to figure out how to take all my years in politics and turn it into something that matters to help me get the vision across. So ultimately, I came up with something called core brand strategy, which I like to consider to be a framework to help taking vision and making it a reality. You see, a concept in politics was the candidate. Very simple. Like, it was very easy for me to understand. We're running for office. But you see, the concept, it comes down to mattering in how you can explain your concept in terms of the world that it creates. You see, you're creating a world with your vision. You're creating a world with your ideas. And in a startup business, these are things like your idea, your pitch, your branding, your logos. What you're going to do, that is your concept. Now, once you have your concept figured out, just like I did in politics with the candidate, we move on to what I call the offer. You see, CORE is an acronym: concepts, offers, relationships, and exposure. Now, an offer in politics is very simple. It was what we were running on. Here's our campaign platform. This is what we're doing. But you see, it's about how you evaluate the offers that you have. It's what you're selling and how it impacts the world. That's the difference between an idea, selling a product, having vision and changing the world. And in politics, this would be in businesses, it's like your call to action. What you're selling, it's not very hard. We don't have to overthink this. Once we have our concept, once we have our offers, now it's about what relationships we need to get there. Because remember, to change the world, to make your vision into something that helps, you need to have a coalition of people. You need to have a collective of people that inspired by the same vision as yours. And in politics, these were the voters, these were the donors, we called them coalitions, the people that we would ultimately get, students for Bush, firefighters for Elizabeth Dole. We built large swaths of groups of people to support us. And it's about how your vision intersects and interacts and attracts these people to come in and support your vision to change the world. That's what matters. Ultimately, in business, these are your ambassadors, your influencers. We all like to say, listen, we're going to work with influencers. Well, I promise you, without a very clear concept, without something that you're offering to the world that matters, it's going to be very hard to get an influencer on board to help you share your vision to a larger audience. And once you have those three things in order, that's when you start to tell the world about this. You see, in politics, we would always do everything we can to get in the news versus paying for ads. We would create stories, do press conferences, get in front of people's eyes. And the same thing applies when it comes down to vision, because, you're making it easier for people to talk about what your vision is and the powerful thing that it can be towards the world. It's the first step. That's getting people to talk about it. They need to be able to understand it. And that's when they can tell other people about it. And when you're looking at the world of startup businesses and small businesses, this is about leveraging your relationships and in the media and leveraging your ideas. And people often ask me, say, Chris, what does it take to get in the news? Well, it's very simple. Do something newsworthy. And your concept, your offers, your relationship should all be something newsworthy before you think you're going to get in the news and have people talk about it. So now that I had a bit of a framework of understanding, one of the things I realized for certain is that, well, in politics, we'd often be selling people on things. And same thing applies in business. We'd be selling people that this candidate's the best, just like we all sell people that our idea is the one that's going to change the world. Our vision is the one that matters. And what I realized for certain is that people don't like to be sold, but they love to buy. And that doesn't matter what your product is. Doesn't matter. Everything is a sale. Well, how do we get people to understand that what we're talking about is meant for them as well? Well, ultimately, we do this by relating to our customers. In politics, we called it relating to our audience. In modern day world, we call it relating to our stakeholders. And that's the biggest thing that's important about the exposure aspect of things, is you need to relate to your audience. Otherwise, nobody's going to understand your vision. And what I can tell you for certain is, just like earlier I mentioned, that to be a visionary leader, you need to be able to storytell. World-changing vision requires story creating. And I'm going to tell you about a couple stories that we helped create along the way that not only took an idea to vision, but also changed the world. Story number one, this is the matter of how we went from idea to vision to launch in 7 days and got to meet President Bill Clinton along the way. This guy came to me and said, listen, Chris, I've got an idea. I've got a surgical center. My idea to get new patients in here, which is ultimately what he wanted, is to bring in more surgeons. Bringing in more surgeons means that we're going to have more patients. My idea is a solution. But then I asked him, I said, listen, doctor, what are some of the challenges? Why aren't patients coming in? And he says, well, listen, of course, there are challenges when it comes down to certain medical treatments we may not treat at our surgical center, but the biggest challenge is finances. I said, finances? I figured insurance pays for everything. And he said, Chris, there's 3 groups of people that come into our surgical center. Some of them pay cash. And he said, this is the smallest group of people, the ones that pay cash. And they're the ones with the least amount of barriers. If you can afford to pay cash for your surgery, you probably have less problems than the ones who can't. And he said the second largest group of people that come into a surgical center are the ones that have private insurance. Now, what he said to me, I said, problem solved. People have insurance. He says, not so quick. He said, listen, what happens is in insurance in the United States, you may have a $20,000 surgery that you need to have done on your shoulder, and your insurance is going to pay for that, but maybe only $19,000 of it. You may have to come up with $1,000 yourself ahead of time, which we call a copay, a deductible, something of this nature, in order for them to write the check to the surgical center for the rest. And he said, Chris, there are plenty of people, hundreds of them each year, that simply cannot afford their copay. So we can't get paid the $20,000 for surgery. We can't do the surgery because they couldn't afford $1,000 upfront payment in order to turn on that insurance payment. And that didn't sit right to me. I felt horrible about it. But he said, Chris, if you feel horrible about that, Let me tell you about the next group of people. You see, this next group of people are the ones that are on public supported health care, the ones where all of their surgical expenditures are paid for. We don't have to worry about that. No copay. But what he said is, Chris, sometimes the reason why these people don't come in and get their surgery that's all paid for is because they can't afford to take time off of work. They can't necessarily afford to take transportation to the surgical center. They can't afford to stay in the recovery center a couple of days after. So it was these minor things that kept them away from surgery. So we sat there and we talked a little bit, and we came up with the vision. You see, what he wanted to do is we wanted to calculate. We spent a lot of money on marketing and public relations when you're coming down to the medical world. So I said, Doctor, I want you to go and calculate all the people that weren't able to get surgery because they couldn't afford the copay, they couldn't afford that transportation, they couldn't afford the minor expenses. And I went back and calculated all the money that we spent on marketing and public relations. And come to find out that we spent more money on marketing and public relations and advertising than it was if you totaled up all of those small frictional expenses that prevented people from getting life-changing surgery. So we decided we were going to do something about this. Imagine a world, this was our vision, imagine a world where we just paid for those particular small barriers. We made sure that people could afford to get to the surgical center and take time off work, even build a recovery home next to the surgical center they can stay in so they didn't have to worry about paying a fee. Shocking. These little things was all it took to make a difference. So we came up with this concept, Project Hugs, helping uninsured get surgery. And on a Monday, we came up with this logo. On a Tuesday, we decided that we were going to put a little message online to recruit brand ambassadors, to build some relationships. Our first offer was you can sit on our ambassador board, fill out the form. And by Wednesday of that week, we had dozens of people from around the city, from around the country that said, listen, we believe that this is amazing. You're onto something. If we pay the small expenses that are blocking people from having the big expenses get paid and changing their lives, we want in on that. And in our pursuit of finding ambassadors, we got a message from somebody. And they were associated with something called the Clinton Global Initiative that was started by one of our presidents of the United States, always in the news, making big impacts. And he said, listen, I think there might be an opportunity to get you invited to the Clinton Global Initiative event that was happening that week, just happened to be happening that week in Chicago. And we got that invitation. We went and we crossed paths with President Bill Clinton and walked away from the Clinton Global Initiative having made a $15 million commitment towards closing these gaps and changing people's lives. As you can see right there on the Clinton Global Initiative website, Project Hug, something that was an idea only but 5-6 days prior, was now something that was on the radar of President Bill Clinton and something that was on its path of changing lives. So much attention was given to this that even our First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, came to town and said, listen, I love what you guys are doing at Project Hugs. I think more people should think about how their ideas should become vision like you guys did. And Project Hugs to this day is still something that is alive and thriving and changing people's lives every single day of the year, all because we took an idea and turned it into vision. Second example I'm going to give today is when your vision is helping other people find their own. This lady came to me. She said, Chris, listen, I've got one of the top homeless shelters in Chicago. You know, we help people with drug and alcohol addiction. We help veterans and all of this. It's called the Safe Haven Foundation. You should definitely come check it out. We've got a great continuum. We know how to get people back on their feet and change lives. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to come check this out. You know, I mean, she mentioned that it was in a dangerous neighborhood. So I'm assuming I'm coming over to kind of a beat down house or something like this, but it doesn't necessarily matter what something looks like to make an impact. But I had no idea I was coming to this massive facility where every single person inside had once been homeless, had once faced challenges, and everyone was smiling. Everyone seemed to be employed. And I was baffled. How could I come to this beautiful place like a Mecca in the middle of this dangerous neighborhood and see so many impactful lives? And she said, Chris, have you ever seen these tulips downtown in the city of Chicago? That was her question to me. I'm like, this is random, but yes, I see these tulips all the time. They're beautiful. She said, did you know that that was something that was planted by a Safe Havens landscaping company? And I'm like, Nellie, I thought that I was here at a homeless shelter. She says, yes, but you see, what we realize is that people often have a hard time getting a job. So if we train them and teach them and create a company for them to work at, the likelihood of them recovering is much higher. So that's exactly what they did. They created their landscaping company, but it wasn't just that. They created a catering company, some of the best catering events in the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago even uses the catering company where 100% of the employees were homeless, former drug and alcohol addicts. Not just a landscape company, not just a catering company. We're talking about a staffing company. We're talking about several companies. We like to call them social enterprises. Were created by this nonprofit because her idea of just helping people get back on their feet after homelessness now had a broader vision that was going to change people's lives beyond the board. They've created so many enterprises and so many impacts that at this point, the recidivism rate, people going back to their drug addiction, back to homelessness, was the lowest at this facility than it was anywhere in the country. World leaders would come tour this facility to see what they were doing. It was amazing. Now, they did all the normal things. They raised money. They did the run to end homelessness. I even got involved in the run to end homelessness. It was more of a walk for me. Matter of fact, I think I started, cut across the field and went to the end and waited for my team. But it's not just the idea of running that matters. It's showing up that matters. Always show up. And we raised a lot of money. We had a lot of donors. A lot of people cared about this organization. But Nellie Vasquez Rowland, she had a different idea. She said to me, Chris, listen, we can raise all the money in the world. We can build all the fancy homes. But sometimes the problems that people have are smaller in scale. And she said to me, Chris, what was one of the biggest challenges you had when you first got out of jail? And I knew right away. I didn't have a birth certificate. I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't have an ID card. All of that was lost. Everything I owned in my life was literally thrown into dumpsters when I went to jail. And I started over with literally nothing, homeless. And she said, Chris, imagine if we can get somebody to sponsor us to create a pathway to creating an ID and a bank account for people. Their first bank account, their first ID, much easier than the process that you went through, Chris, and much easier than the process they all go through. And I'm like, this is novel. How do you plan on doing that? She said, well, Chris, that's what we have to figure out. So when we were raising money for the Run to End Homelessness, the largest event of its type, we came across this company called Mozito. Now it's been bought out and is a massive company. But what they were doing was helping the underbanked. So we figured, hey, listen, they wanted to be the biggest sponsor of our Run to End Homelessness, but as opposed to taking their money and putting it towards some banners and some marketing material, we put it into a fund, and that fund was going to seed the first bank accounts for the graduates for a safe haven. And then we took that card, which was like a prepaid Visa debit card, and we got it where we could put people's pictures on it, their signature on the back. And we went to the Secretary of State, the person in charge of driver's license in the state of Illinois, and we asked him, can we make this bank card, people's first bank account after they got through drug and alcohol recovery? Can we make it with a photo on it and the signature on the back serve the purpose as an ID in order for them to apply for their birth certificate again or apply for a driver's license? And he gave us the thumbs up. So we took this idea of helping people, this idea of fundraising, came up with the vision that if we can eliminate the barriers that some of the people have to getting back on their feet, the likelihood of them falling back off their feet was much lower. And this became the ID that people used in the first bank account that they had. And we did it because this lady's ideas and vision were broader in this sense, as opposed to just taking a check and spending it on marketing. She did something with it to eliminate the barriers. That's a lady with vision, and that's how we change people's lives. I'm going to tell you about one additional case study today before we wrap it up. And this is one of my favorites. This is the idea that sometimes you have to risk everything to make sure your vision matters. And if you remember from earlier, vision is about commitment. Vision is about persistence. It's about thinking about things broader than what they are. This lady came to me. She said, listen, Chris, I've got a shoe company. And my idea is that if people put my shoes on Amazon, if I'm able to sell my shoes on Amazon, more people are going to obviously be customers of mine, but then see some of the exotic shoe designs that she had. She had me go to her website. At the time, Style Up Girl was actually bought out, and it's now a big company. And she said, and I said to her, I said, listen, I think these shoes are interesting. I've never seen anything like them on Amazon. So, and this was before everyone had everything on Amazon. I said, so what is your idea to get there? She said to me, she said, Chris, every day she walks to work and she walks past a homeless person who has a sign that says, I need shoes. Now here she's a shoe executive. She's a shoe entrepreneur. But yet she's walking by somebody every single day who was homeless in Chicago that didn't have shoes at all. And she had thousands of pairs. And she said, Chris, what I want to do as a marketing campaign is I want to create something called Happy Box. So when people buy a pair of shoes from our website, we give them a prepaid envelope and ultimately encourage them to take a pair of old shoes that they have, put it in the box, put the envelope or the mailing label on top of it, and send it back. And maybe those donations of old shoes is going to be something that can help this person on the side of the street with their problems. Now, I said, Monica, hopefully they're not sending the same kind of shoes back. I'm not sure a person's a pair of shoes to get around every day that this would meet the standard. But one of the things that I do know is a happy box doesn't describe what you're doing as much as you want it to. I'm glad that it makes people happy, but you see, you're giving back with a box, something very simple, something people didn't think about. I love the idea. This was a wonderful marketing campaign, so we renamed it Give Back Box. Now, what we needed to do was try this. That's the one thing so many people don't realize, that the big difference between an idea and a vision to actually mattering is actually doing it, executing it, trying it, taking the risk. So we decided that we were going to do our first pilot. This was the graphic we came up with. This is the only graphic that we came up with at the time. This is what launched it all. We used it on Facebook. We printed out some logos. We attached some boxes, and we did a photo shoot so people knew what we were talking about. We created an envelope, and this envelope was go in with every pair of shoes that she sold, and we were limited on budget at this point. We were paying for the address labels ourselves. We considered it a marketing expense, but we needed to know how to distribute these shoes. So we went back to that nonprofit, a Safe Haven, and we said, listen, you guys work with homeless. You guys work with people. Maybe you are a good partner to help us distribute these shoes. Now, we didn't think many shoes were going to come, but we decided we were going to do our first pilot, and then we mailed them off. The first boxes came back in. This is Monica and her business partner at the time. And there was, I think, 6 total boxes. I went and opened the big one in the middle of the room. And I'm like, listen, I'm a bit concerned what type of shoes are going to be in this box. I'm just hoping that there are shoes in it. So we opened those boxes. And as you notice, there's one pair of kids' shoes in here, but there was tons of other things. There was clothing. There was electronics, graphing calculators, pens and pencils, school supplies. Now this, we said, hey, mail your shoes back to us, your old shoes in a shoebox. We never in a million years thought that our customers had a broader vision than even we did. You see, they saw this as a vehicle to give back in a broader sense than just shoes. Some people didn't want to give shoes. Maybe they didn't have. Maybe that's why they got new shoes, right? Because they didn't have old shoes that were workable. So we were shocked at this. And we brought this stuff over to a Safe Haven Foundation. And we're like, listen, we're sorry. It's not all the shoes that we wanted. And they're like, this is amazing. This helps us even more than just shoes. You have no idea how many people are in need for these basic human necessities. And you really have closed the gap to us. Now, that made it all over the news in Chicago, all over the news. You know, local startups, marketing campaign ends up impacting lives of people throughout the city. And it got a lot of people's attention, including this website, Karma Loop, which is a very popular online clothing store. And they said, listen, Chris, we've got tons of boxes. We would love for our customers to do this particular aspect. This would be great. And at the same time as this awesome clothing store reached out to us, a website called Newegg, who does computer sales, one of the nerdiestly cool websites on the planet. They said, listen, Chris, we got big boxes. Imagine how many give back items our customers can do when they return a monitor when they return using a box from a computer monitor. You can fit a lot of things in these boxes. Back then, I'm sure people still had big, bulky monitors. But they said, Chris, we have a challenge here. Newegg's and Karma Loop's customers, they're all over the world. We'd never be able to handle the amount of customer influx coming into a Safe Haven Foundation. And in terms of all these boxes, a Safe Haven was just there for the pilot. They weren't going to be able to hand out all this stuff to everybody on the planet. So they said, Chris, come back to us when you have a partner that's a little bit widespread in a larger capacity versus a Safe Haven. So we did some research and we came across Goodwill. Goodwill is one of the largest organizations in the country. They help people that were once homeless, once addicts, and everything get back on their feet. They employ them, and they run a series of thrift stores around the world. I don't want to minimize it with the word thrift store, but reselling stores around the country where not only are they taking in donations, but they're employing the very people that they're trying to impact with those clothes to actually close the gap. And now we had it, so we went with our second pilot. Now, this was something that was epic. Tons and tons of boxes started coming in, and we're sitting there, and I sat with Monica one day, and I remember it so clearly. She said, I was apologizing. I'm like, listen, I'm sorry. I know our goal here was to put your shoes on Amazon and get them sold. And you could just tell right then and there was a big shift in her mind. She was so happy with what we were doing with Give Back Box, she almost forgot about that original goal because all of our goals and our vision were about what we were doing here. And she said, Chris, that's okay. I'm happy with what this is. We never in a million years thought that we would get a message from Amazon. And they said, listen, we love what you guys are doing so much over there that we would like Give Back Box to be our annual holiday promotion to allow us to extend an opportunity for all of the Amazon salespeople around the world to use Give Back Box as their platform for giving back as well. This was shocking. It was game-changing, and it grew so much from there, where Give Back Box, which was once a marketing campaign, an idea to help get business for her shoes, became such a broad vision. It was featured all over and started having some real world-changing results. You see, there's been over 1 million Give Back Boxes that have been shipped around the country, full of goods that were once going to be thrown away, now finding a second life, helping people that need it the most, people like me when I was starting over. In addition to that, even toys like Lego blocks. We have shipped over 55,000 pounds of Lego blocks over. Monica has, through the years, cared a lot about focusing on finding specific things that people have a lot of need. And during the pandemic, Lego company said, listen, we would love for people that have never used Legos before because of barriers, maybe cost or access, to have an opportunity. And they created the Lego Replay campaign, in which Monica and Give Back Bucks were some of the largest people to impact that particular campaign for Lego Corporation. In 2020 alone, 1.4 million pounds of clothing were diverted from a landfill and had a second life. Now, to put that in perspective, that's over 19 million pieces of clothing that are not accumulating and destroying our environment in a big pile somewhere in trash heap. They got a second life because, you see, Monica knew the difference between ideas and vision. She also knew that sometimes you have to risk everything in order to make your vision a reality. And ultimately, her goal was to be on Amazon. Her goal was to win against her competitors in the market space. Never should she think that all of her competitors became people that also used Give Back Box. These are people that once she competed with that actually used Give Back Box as their charitable give back model each year. So what was once a marketing campaign and a go-to-market strategy ended up being her business. Monica stopped selling shoes, and Give Back Box became her full-time gig, and she's impacted thousands and thousands of lives around the world because she knew how to take her vision and change the world with it. One thing I realized about all these great leaders is that they all share authenticity in their purpose. You see, so many people think, well, I'm passionate about this, I'm passionate about that. Passion is not enough. It's purpose that matters. Your purpose will guide your passions. And authenticity to what your purpose is, that's disruptive. People come to me all the time, so like, I've got a disruptive idea that's going to change the world. And I said, listen, being authentic is disruptive enough in modern society. So always be authentic. Never give up on what you believe in. That's how you really do something with the power of vision. So much so that, you know, my mom always said to me, Chris, you need to, she called me Christopher. Christopher, you need to always do what you can to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And during the pandemic, towards the end of the pandemic, I was asked to be part of a fellowship with some of the most amazing leaders in the world. The top 100 chief marketing officers and change agents in the world were all assembled to do a fellowship for the Institute for Real Growth. They do this annually once a year. It's considered to be one of the most prestigious honors. And little Chris Foltz, who wanted to be an astronaut from Rockford, Illinois, who was basically running his entire operations out of a barn in the backyard of the middle of the desert, was asked to join with leaders of Facebook, Google, the CMOs of Ford, Nissan, Unilever. And I spent 7 months with them as my peers, learning everything. I was surely surrounding myself with people that were smarter than me. And that's ultimately what led me to where I'm at today, to be able to share this message of vision with you. And I'm going to close with this. You see, I've done a lot of things in my life, and I've had a lot of successes, and I would argue that a lot of them required vision. But oftentimes what I realized is that I was doing things for the wrong reasons, whether it was because I wanted to become president or whether it's because I wanted to make money. And a lot of things I did in my life didn't really align with what I cared about. And then I knew right away, well, that's probably why I had the problems, because you see, when you do things for the right reasons in life, they won't end for the wrong reasons. And I really appreciate this time to be able to share this message with you today on the power of vision and share some examples. I'm such a huge fan of what the Uganda Enterprise Challenge is, but the organization as a whole does such amazing things, not just for Nigeria, not just for the continent of Africa, but for the world. And I'm inspired. I am inspired by people like all of you, people that every single day wake up, think about their ideas, think about their goals, start to understand what vision is to change the world. So I'm very appreciative for having the opportunity to share this message with all of you today. Thank you, my friend Remy.
That's really amazing, 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 amazing. Thank you so much, Professor Chris Foss, for doing it again. Like I said, yes, yes. I think we are going to give you that honor. You should become a prof. As far as we are concerned, we're going to raise the motion for that, and I'm sure that the Ugumba leaders and fellows that have been impacted, they are going to also support the motion that I have moved this afternoon. So you are Professor Chris Force. As
Well,
far as the
with that,
Ugumba status
that
community is
that means
concerned.
I get to do
So
office hours, Remy. So that means if people want to meet with me, I don't care where they're at in their lifespan. Reach out to Remy. Reach out. I'm going to meet with them.
that's
Professor Chris is going to meet with you. All right. I look forward to it.
very good. Fantastic. 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 This is really amazing. And I'm sure that from the comment section, the the comments that are coming, I think that shows that they have really grasped everything that you have said concerning the power of vision. I think let me take some time to show some of the comments on the from the audience to know so that you know that they have really gotten the message that you have released once again this afternoon. Let me start from the beginning. Okay, good. From this is from what's his name? Okay, Oladimeji. Okay, Oladimeji. Vision empowers and gives you direction. Thank you so much, Oladimeji, for that. Okay, this one again is from. This one is from Xerox. Failure is one of the steps we need to climb in the ladder of success. Thank you so much. This one is from Oladimeji again. Vision gives clarity to your purpose. Thank you, Oladimeji. Wonderful. Okay. Oh, the same Oladimeji is saying that the session is where is it?
It's loaded.
Okay.
That's
Just
good.
hold on. Okay. Oh, the session is loaded. You saw that. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. I think this one is from Norma. Norma, what did you say?
There is so many comments in
Oh,
here.
sorry. I
I'm so
think.
appreciative of all these comments, Remy. I'm just now seeing all the
Oh,
comment stream. Amazing.
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. She said, changing the world definitely requires vision. Thank you so much, Norma Ibediro, for that. Changing the world definitely requires vision. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Samuel Joseph is saying, don't talk the talk, you must also walk the talk. I think that's what he meant there. Thank you so much. Okay, this one is from, oh, good. This is from Stance Fashion. Stance Fashion is saying that okay, Stance Fashion vision is long term. Okay, she's trying to the difference between idea and vision. Fantastic. Okay, then this one again from Oladimeji. Stay connected to your vision. Therefore, you must walk the talk. Thank you so much, Oladimeji. Okay. Okay. This one is from fantastic from Norma again. Norma she's saying ideas come from. Is it showing on the screen now? Okay,
It
just hold
is.
on. Okay. Okay. I think Norma said ideas come from a specific area requires something to actually make a difference. Vision is seeing the world from a better perspective, which is persistent and long-term cost. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Norma. This one is from Oladimeji again, and that's my vision is my power to make an impact. Fantastic. That's fantastic. Okay. Again,
Well, I think Remy's internet has a challenge. So I just want all of you to make sure that feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me, get my information from Remy. I see a lot of the comments in here talking about wanting to understand
Okay.
more about ideas. I'm happy to meet with all of you. I really, truly am. Sorry,
Okay.
Remy, I was giving a
Yeah.
micro speech when
Sorry
you
for
were
that. I was
gone.
booted up. Okay. Okay. Let me see which other one we'll take now. Okay. Thanks so much, Professor. They have already picked it. What's her name? She's saying, "Thank you, Professor Chris. Thank you so much, Professor." What's her name? Thank you so much, Professor Chris. The session was so insightful and inspiring. Thank you so much. That's Mide Amusambis. Oh no, I can't. I don't know how to pronounce that. Thank you so much for being part of the session this afternoon. Okay, so like I said, if you have any questions for Professor Chris, go ahead and drop them on the comment section, and he's here to answer you if you have any question for him. Then this is
Well, I appreciate all of you. I'm reading through the comments. It's amazing.
okay. I think, yeah, we've really done justice to that, to the session from Access TV. What an impactful session. Thank you so much for that. I'm very much improved by this training. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is 15 minutes past 13, sorry, 15 minutes past 3 p.m. We can't keep Professor Chris longer than this. So at this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being part of the session this afternoon. Remember the video, you can always replay the video on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. They are there, they are available for you to replay as many times as you want, so that you can really absorb every message that he has dropped on. Oh, okay. Thank you so much. So at this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to call it a day. Thank you so much, Professor Chris, for being part of this session again today. It's really amazing. Thank you for the impact that you have kept, making in the lives of our young people here in Africa. Through the Ugumba Leadership Center. We really appreciate you. We really appreciate you. On behalf of my boss, His Excellency Ugumba Uchemusu, we want to appreciate you for your contributions to raising these young leaders and entrepreneurs for Africa. That is our vision, and we are glad that you are part of this vision, and we are
Thank
also
you.
contributing to make this a reality. We appreciate you, and we look forward to having you whenever we call upon you again next time. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
sir.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank, thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.